Teen Witch turned a forgotten 1989 teen comedy into one of cable television's strangest cult enchantments. Premiering in 1989, it followed Robin Lively's Louise Miller, a shy high schooler who discovers she's descended from witches and uses her new powers to chase popularity, love, and the perfect makeover. Alongside her were Dan Gother's Dreamboat Brad, Lisa Fuller's Queen Bee Randa, and Dick Sargent's well-meaning dad Frank Miller, all orbiting a world of locker room crushes, neon outfits, and one truly unforgettable rap in a back alley. Across a brief, disastrous theatrical run and years of non-stop cable reruns, the film quietly transformed from box office embarrassment into a rite of passage for latchkey kids who stumbled across it on lazy Saturdays and late-night sleepovers. Yet behind the musical numbers, magical necklaces, and top that bravado was a saga of slashed budgets, toned-down scripts, improvised solutions, bruised egos, and the kind of accidental choices that only make sense in hindsight once the movie has become legend. These are 15 shocking facts about Teen Witch, how it was conceived as a copycat, reshaped on the fly, buried at the box office, and then resurrected by cable TV and the internet. And stick around for number 15 to see how the film casually strands one unlucky character in magical limbo and never looks back. Teen Witch didn't begin as a quirky original. It started as a deliberate echo of another hit. After Michael J. Fox scored big with Teen Wolf in 1985, producers chased the formula. An awkward high school nobody discovers supernatural powers, flips the social ladder, and suddenly becomes the center of attention. The early pitch was essentially Teen Wolf, but make it cute and witchy. The parallels were obvious. Instead of a werewolf slam-dunking on the basketball court, you get a witch rewriting social hierarchies with spells. The transformation scenes swap fur and fangs for sequins, lipstick, and slow-motion hallway reveals. Even the taglines marched in step, Teen Wolf promising a kid who always wanted to be special but never expected this, while Teen Witch countered with she's a teenager, she's a witch, and high school will never be the same. In the 1980s, Hollywood loved a knockoff that stayed just different enough to avoid legal trouble. But once cameras rolled, something odd happened. What began as a calculated imitation drifted into its own stranger territory. Musical numbers, magical necklaces, a rap showdown, and a tone that was less sports fantasy and more cable TV fever dream. It never became the theatrical hit Teen Wolf was, but the copycat carved out its own cult identity, powered less by marketing and more by kids who found it by accident and never forgot it. Before the makeover, the Teen Witch that aired on cable, sleepover-friendly, PG-13 and mostly wholesome, isn't the version that first landed on the producer's desk. Producer Alana Lamrose recalled that early drafts leaned hard into the kind of gross-out humor-dominating 80s teen comedies. Think Porky's, not pastel fantasy. There were shower scenes that showed far more skin, tacky off-color sexual jokes, and an overall sensibility that pushed the story into R-rated territory. Director Dorian Walker later admitted the original tone fit right in with the era's raunchier teen movies. But when they considered who this film might actually be for, teen girls, families, and the emerging cable market, the approach stopped making sense. The team made a conscious decision to pull the script back from the edge. Out went the more explicit material and the crudest gags. In came a lighter blend of fantasy, romance, and music, enough edge to feel a little daring, but not so much that parents would march in and eject the tape halfway through a sleepover. Some moments still snuck through, like Louise accidentally forcing her teacher to strip down to his boxers in front of the class. But the overall effect shifted. Instead of another disposable lewd comedy, Teen Witch became strangely sincere, leaning on spells, crushes, and makeovers more than locker room jokes. That tonal pivot probably saved it from disappearing into a pile of forgotten 80s sex farces and set it up to become the sort of movie cable channels could play over and over again. Teen Witch's financial story was cursed from the start, first behind the camera, then in front of it. Officially, the production budget is listed at $2.5 million, but director Dorian Walker has said his actual working allowance was closer to $1.25 million, with executive producer Masha Diamant telling him bluntly that the larger figure on paper wouldn't be what he had in hand. Whatever the real total, The gap forced the production into a leaner, faster mode than originally planned. Walker and producer Alana Lamrose were pushed into a get-it-in 2 or 3 takes mindset. Elaborate shots were trimmed. Sets like Madame Serena's house were built with only what they absolutely needed. No functional staircase, for example, just an illusion created with camera angles and clever blocking. The 30-day shoot was compressed down to 25. Then came the other half of the curse, the release. When Teen Witch finally reached theaters in April 1989, it earned just $27,843 across its entire theatrical run, opening with a brutal $3,875 weekend. It had the misfortune to open against Pet Sematary and Field of Dreams. One offered Stephen King horror with a zombie cat, the other a sentimental baseball fantasy with Kevin Costner. Critics were brutal. The Los Angeles Times described it as full of teen wishful fulfillment fantasies and condescending moralizing, while TV Guide dismissed it as a predictable teenage love story with unmemorable musical numbers. With minimal marketing, no star power, and heavy competition, the movie vanished almost as soon as it appeared. Financially, Teen Witch never stood a chance. One of Teen Witch's most memorable locations is Madame Serena's spooky Victorian mansion, the place where Louise discovers the truth about her powers. That haunting exterior wasn't built for the movie at all. It was already famous. The house is the same Los Angeles Victorian featured in Michael Jackson's iconic Thriller music video. Located on Carroll Avenue in the Angelino Heights neighborhood, the property is known as the Sanders House and dates back to 1887. The distinctive balcony, the Gothic detailing, the looming windows, they're all there. For viewers who grew up with MTV on loop, seeing that facade again in Teen Witch creates an instant sense of déjà vu. On the inside, though, things were much more makeshift. The production didn't shoot Serena's interior in the real house. Instead, they built a studio set that, thanks to budget constraints, never actually included a functional staircase. Audiences remember Louise walking down from Serena's parlor and exiting as if she's descending into the rest of the house. In reality, there were no stairs to walk. The production sold the illusion entirely through camera angles and clever blocking, framing the action so viewers would fill in the geometry themselves. You've got the world's most famous horror house on the outside, and a set that literally can't support a staircase on the inside. In a movie already built on illusion, spells, transformations, wishes granted with a locket, the fact that the staircase only exists in our heads feels oddly appropriate. Most films, even small ones, hire costume designers with long resumes and fashion school pedigrees. Teen Witch went in a different direction and kept things in the family. Elaine Lively, Robin Lively's real-life mother and a working talent manager, stepped in to help style many of the film's outfits. Instead of a massive wardrobe budget, they relied on thrift finds, personal clothing, and a mother's eye for what would make her daughter pop on screen. The result is a time capsule of late 80s teen fashion, oversized blazers, layers of lace, thrift store denim, chunky belts, and sequins that seem to multiply from scene to scene. Lively herself confirmed in later interviews that her mother was the true creative force behind Louise's look, calling the wardrobe her mom's vision and crediting Elaine with shaping the character on a fundamental level. Louise's evolving look from shy sweater-clad wallflower to magically enhanced it girl mirrors the real Lively family's sense of style, not a trend report pinned to a costume truck wall. It also hints at just how much creative DNA runs through the Lively clan. Elaine steps behind the scenes as an impromptu stylist, Robin becomes a Teen Witch icon, and her younger half-sister grows up to be Blake Lively, a future fashion fixture and star in her own right. On a movie this small, every extra skill mattered. Elaine Lively's off-the-books costume design gave Teen Witch a look that was equal parts authentically 80s and unmistakably personal. The Teen Witch that made it to screens could have had a very different face at its center. At the height of her Electric Youth fame, pop star Debbie Gibson was offered the role of Louise Miller. Fresh off hits like Only in My Dreams and Shake Your Love, a Teen Witch musical fantasy anchored by a chart-topping singer could have been an easy marketing hook. The producers even met with Gibson at a hotel to pitch her the part. But somewhere in the process, whether because of scheduling, contract terms, or creative disagreements, the deal fell apart. Gibson walked away, and the role ended up with Robin Lively. She wasn't the only near miss. A young Ellen DeGeneres, years before her own sitcom and talk show success, was reportedly considered for a teacher role. Walker had seen her at comedy clubs and even held a reading with her, but the distributor stepped in and vetoed the casting. Imagine an alternate timeline where Debbie Gibson belts power ballads as Louise while Ellen grades papers tossing off dry one-liners in the faculty lounge. That version of Teen Witch never happened. In the end, Gibson avoided a box office flop. DeGeneres kept climbing toward her own breakout, and Lively inherited a role that would follow her for decades, not because it was a hit, but because cable and the internet refused to let it go. On screen, Teen Witch sets up a classic triangle. Louise pines for Brad, the handsome football player. Randa, the queen bee cheerleader, already has him. Off-screen, though, the love story went in a completely different direction. Dan Gothard, who played Louise's crush Brad, and Lisa Fuller, who played her rival Randa, started dating during production. By 1990, the pair were married, and unlike so many Hollywood relationships, they stayed that way. The mean girl and the heartthrob built a real-life happily ever after that outlasted the movie's brief theatrical life and long cable revival. For Robin Lively, it was a little more complicated. She's openly admitted she had a genuine crush on Gothard during filming. When she found out he'd fallen for Fuller instead, she was heartbroken, even as she supported their relationship and eventually attended their wedding. While Louise is conjuring love spells and dreaming about Brad on screen, the actor playing him is falling for her in-story rival just off camera. Years later, Lively found her own real-life Brad when she married actor Bart Johnson. The Teen Witch cast didn't need movie magic to find lasting relationships. They managed that part on their own. Teen Witch doesn't just play with witch tropes in its story. It quietly borrows from TV's witchy past in its casting. Louise's dad, Frank Miller, is played by Dick Sargent, the second actor to portray Darren Stevens, the long-suffering husband on the classic 60s sitcom Bewitched. For viewers who grew up on reruns, his face comes with instant associations, magical mishaps, disapproving in-laws, and a household forever one spell away from chaos. Placing Sargent in the role of a suburban dad raising a teenage, which feels like a sly wink. In Bewitched, Darren spends years reacting to wife Samantha's powers and her mother Endora's magical meddling. In Teen Witch, Frank Miller is blissfully unaware that history is repeating itself in his own family. There are no explicit nods in the dialogue. Nobody jokes about déjà vu, but the meta layer is hard to ignore. It's as if the universe of televised witchcraft quietly extended itself, Samantha's world and Louise's world connected by a familiar face trying once again to keep his footing in a house where magic is never far away. The most famous scene in Teen Witch, the Top That Rap showdown, wasn't part of the original plan at all. By the time producers decided the movie needed one more big musical moment, principal photography was basically over. The cast was brought back for a quick reshoot with a simple directive. They were going to rap in an alley in full 80s gear. It wasn't carefully integrated into the story, and it wasn't the product of months of development. It was a late addition slapped on with the urgency of "we need another number, and we need it now." Director Dorian Walker wasn't sold on the final result, feeling the tone and execution were off. Songwriter Larry Ware later joked that Teen Witch's cult success convinced him there must be some pretty messed up people out there, even as he acknowledged the movie's peculiar staying power. To the people making it, that was a patched-in gamble. To the audience that discovered Teen Witch later, it became the entire brand. In the strange alchemy of cult cinema, the hastily added scene nobody was sure about ended up defining the movie's afterlife more than any carefully planned moment ever could. If that feels like secondhand embarrassment distilled into 3 minutes, that's because everyone involved understood exactly what they were doing and feared the worst. Noah Blake, who played the rapping tough guy Rhett, later admitted he was in peril that this would be just totally humiliating, fully aware that the combination of the choreography, the lyrics, and the setting might not age gracefully. Mandy Ingber, who played Polly and traded verses with Blake, has also spoken openly about how mortified she felt during filming. The cast could feel the awkwardness radiating off that backyard alley set like heat off summer asphalt. They knew it was weird. They knew it might look ridiculous, but they committed to every line and gesture with deadly seriousness. At the time, most of them assumed Teen Witch would go straight to video or fade quietly after cable airings. Decades later, the scene went viral online, inspiring Halloween costumes, TikTok duets, parody recreations, and couples who can still lip-sync every cringe-perfect beat at parties. What felt like potential career damage in 1989 turned into something stranger, a pop culture touchstone so bad it wrapped back around to unforgettable. Teen Witch's dreamy finale, the slow dance bathed in colored lights to the song Finest Hour, almost didn't exist. Test audiences made it clear the movie needed a bigger emotional landing, and the original ending didn't deliver the full prom night fantasy. In response, the filmmakers scrambled to add a new musical moment. Composer Larry Weir and songwriter Cindy Valentine came up with Finest Hour late in the process, written specifically to give Louise and Brad's story the musical resolution audiences were craving. The choreography came from someone with serious dance pedigree. Robert Bass, the film's choreographer, had literally danced as a jet boy in the original 1961 film version of West Side Story and mapped out every sway, spin, and glittering turn on that gym floor. This tiny movie with a slashed budget had Broadway-adjacent talent shaping its climactic scene. The song may have been a rush job, but the choreography gave the ending a strangely polished feel. It's corny, it's sincere, and like so much of Teen Witch, it works far better than the circumstances behind it suggest it should. Nearly 2 decades after Teen Witch became a cable cult favorite, Hollywood tried to wave the wand again. In 2008, a remake went into development at United Artists with High School Musical's Ashley Tisdale attached to play a new version of Louise. A Disney Channel star with a built-in fan base and a musical fantasy premise sounded like a perfect match. The plan was to keep the heart of the story, while swapping in modern details. Landlines would give way to cell phones, shoulder pads to 2000s trends, and the songs would be reimagined for a generation raised on High School Musical. But like so many promising remakes, this one never made it past development. Rewrites, budget questions, and scheduling issues stalled the project until the heat faded entirely. Tisdale moved on. The remake never entered production. Teen Witch remained frozen in 1989, preserved in VHS tracking lines, cable reruns, and the memories of viewers who stumbled across it late at night. Some cult movies belong to a specific moment. However flawed and low-budget it is, the original Teen Witch may have cast the only version of this spell that was ever meant to stick. If the story ended with that $27,843 gross, Teen Witch would be a footnote. Instead, it became a late-night fixture and a generational in-joke. In the early 90s, channels hungry for affordable content snapped up small family-friendly movies, and Teen Witch slipped into heavy rotation on HBO and Cinemax. Kids who had never heard of its theatrical release started encountering it the way so many cult films are discovered, by accident, homesick, or up too late at a sleepover, flipping through channels when you landed on A Girl in a Locket, A Victorian House, or a wildly out-of-place rap number. VHS rentals extended the spell. In 2007, ABC Family acquired the television rights and folded Teen Witch into its annual 13 Nights of Halloween lineup, locking the movie into a yearly tradition for an entirely new generation. By the time the internet arrived, the audience was ready to reconnect, quote along, and share clips. A movie the box office rejected found its true home on living room televisions and worn rental tapes. For a film so defined by its music, there was never an official soundtrack album. Songs like I Like Boys, Top That, and Finest Hour are woven into the movie's DNA, yet when Teen Witch became a cult phenomenon, there was no record, cassette, or CD for anyone to buy. The producers didn't anticipate the film's future popularity and never budgeted for a soundtrack release. Fans improvised, recording songs directly off the TV audio and making their own bootleg cassettes. Generations experienced the soundtrack under a layer of VHS hiss, rewinding favorite numbers until the tape wore thin. The Weir brothers eventually re-recorded the songs with new performers for a stage musical adaptation, releasing a 2007 audio CD that was the closest thing fans ever got to a real album. But to this day, Teen Witch's music lives more in memories, clips, and homemade recordings than on any sanctioned album. Teen Witch isn't just remembered for its songs and style. It's also quietly infamous for some spectacularly unresolved story beats fans still joke about decades later. The biggest offender is the disappearing date at the drive-in. Louise uses her powers to make an obnoxious boy simply vanish from the car. It's played as a comedic wish fulfillment gag, and then nothing.
He's gone.
The movie never circles back. There's no throwaway line about where he ended up, no shot of him reappearing somewhere weird, no hint the spell wore off. Viewers are left to wonder if Louise accidentally banished a classmate to some magical purgatory, with the story shrugging and moving on. Then there's the student with the broken leg, clearly shown hobbling around school in a full cast, who appears a few scenes later standing perfectly fine with no explanation. Under a harsher lens, these goofs might be damning, but for most viewers they became part of the charm. The movie moves so quickly from spells to songs to dances that you barely have time to register who's missing a cast or a date. Those unresolved oddities are a reminder of how Teen Witch was made: fast, cheap, and with more concern for feeling than flawless logic. The magic doesn't always add up, but somehow the spell holds. Thanks for watching these 15 shocking facts about Teen Witch, the tiny 1989 fantasy that bombed in theaters and cast a long, strange spell over cable TV. Which fact surprised you the most? Hit like, subscribe, and share this with a friend who still knows every word to that alleyway rap. And until next time, keep watching back before